Welcome to GTM Confessions, where we share what it takes to be a go-to-market professional today. Because it is freaking hard and it's far from the glamorous picture that social media often paints. Consider this show your weekly go-to-market therapy session. I'm your host, Stephanie Cox. I have more than 20 years of experience and I've done almost everything go-to-market related in my career. In this episode, I chat with Leslie Greenwood, CEO at Chief Evangelist Consulting and co-founder of Wednesday Women, about what it really takes to create a community, how to know if your company is ready to build one, the level of investment involved, and so much more. Welcome to the show, Leslie. I'm super excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here. I see that we have matching outfits on. Must be the Indiana aesthetic, black with a sweater.
Right? It's also is it spring? Is it winter? Depends on the day. Yesterday it was 30. It's going to be 60 later this week. Very confusing in Indiana.
Same in Dallas. It could be 90 or 40.
Right? I am ready for spring though.
Me too.
So I'm excited to talk to you about all things community building today, which is funny because I remember when I first met you on a phone call about when we were interviewing to join. At the time it was Revenue Collective. It's now Pavilion as a member. And I was the person that did your interview so you could join. And that was kind of like your first introduction to community, right?
Yeah, formalized community. At a previous role, my first SaaS startup role, we had like a Facebook community. And I always loved dabbling in there, and answering questions, even though it wasn't my job, but I was the one mostly in there. So I guess formally, yes, my first real work in community. Actually, it wasn't work at that time. It was just being a member.
A member, which made you fall in love with community and kind of make a career out of it.
Yep, exactly.
So let's level set. How do you define community?
Okay, well, let's start with first. Community, I say, is like Kleenex. Everyone says community, but it's like Kleenex. It's really tissues. Yeah, everybody calls it Kleenex, but it's tissues. Some tissues are just like plush, and you're like, oh, this is so fabulous. And some will make you bleed. That is, so let's just say when we say community, it can be anything from great to horrible. It also can be anything. If I look at jobs for community managers, it could be a social media manager. It could be an events manager. It could be any combination of those things. So community is defined in so many different ways. When I usually talk about community, and this is an interesting thing, it's a defined place where a certain set of people meet that have a similar mindset or goal or interest to conversate together. Traditionally, in this case, and what I've experienced, I'm talking about online community. Of course, there's that same principle is like your church or your neighborhood group or something like that, but I'm specifically talking about online community. However, I know we'll probably talk about this later, but my other business is Wednesday Women. People call it a community, but literally it is a LinkedIn audience. And I would have totally poo-pooed anybody that tried to call their LinkedIn audience a community. And we still don't have a community, but if people call it a community and want to be members of the community and want to be chapter heads of our community, which is a LinkedIn audience, we just go with it. So, my take has changed a little bit on that, but the people I work with, it is for a defined online community around a product, service, or ideal.
So are there certain criteria that you feel kind of differentiates what you would call a community versus a LinkedIn group or even just a Facebook group or any of the other social media groups that aren't maybe truly communities?
I think community is a little bit more of mindset. So do people come in and help each other? Do they have it really is a common, like I said before, a common ideal. Even every SaaS company that has a community, it's not about the product unless it's a support community. It's about something else, up-leveling the users, helping them be more effective, make their lives better. And I think you can have that on Facebook. I don't think it really matters where you have it if the people are coming together to help each other and support each other. And it's, I guess, mostly it has to be facilitated in some sort. Otherwise, that generally just doesn't happen.
So, thinking about kind of like community definition, what are the biggest misconceptions that exist around trying to build a community today? Because I feel like it's a really hot topic. Everyone's attempting to do whatever they call a community. So, what are those big misconceptions that you've seen play out?
The three hot topics on community that what I think people get wrong. Now, granted, this is my personal take, and I have some really strong opinions on certain things, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they're right. One is that it's easy. That it's inexpensive and you will see ROI right away, and that you can just like throw up a Slack. Like everybody threw up a Slack during COVID, and that worked because we all had more of an intense need for community. That no longer works. And a lot of my customers are the ones who did that. And now we're going back, doing an assessment, restructuring things so that we can have a strategy for the community. What I say is, it'll take us about 4 to 6 months to build a really good community. It will take 6 months once it's live for members to start like helping each other. We want to start seeing them jump in with each other around 6 months. It's 18 months until you're going to put anything positive about your community on a board slide. You might as well just pretend it doesn't exist until 18 months. And then it's 3 years to be an actually mature community. So if it's a company looking to invest in it that is not charging a fee, they have to really understand the long-term mindset. I make a project plan with every customer, and they have ranged from 50 to 70 items on the project plan to launch the community. So it is not easy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like misunderstand what it takes to get a community launch, but then they're kind of like, well, I built the community. Well, and like you mentioned during COVID, that Slack group, and they will come and people will engage and it'll be really easy.
No, they do not come. They did in COVID. They do not come. They do not engage. And it needs full time, or at least an appropriate amount of time based on the number of members you have, facilitation. If I look back at when I did work at the community that we met through, there was a moment we had 18 team members underneath the community running it like the engine, just to keep it smooth. And that doesn't mean it was smooth. Like I called it smooth like a duck. So nice and on top, and we were paddling like hell underneath every day. So now granted, that's different because it was 2,000 to 10,000 members in 2 years and programming and learning and all this kind of stuff, but it'll never work without somebody dedicated to be the facilitator. And I actually won't work with people if they won't provide a dedicated resource. It cannot be your social media manager's extra job. It can't be your implementation manager's extra job, because guess what's going to fall to the wayside, and it will die. And we've seen it. I could name some, but I'm not going to name them, that like pop up, they're super popular, and then all of a sudden they're gone in 6 months.
What do you think the role of a facilitator is? So I know you mentioned it has to be dedicated, but what is their job in terms of engaging with the community, starting conversations? I know also probably reviewing what's being shared as well, because sometimes you do have community members that go off the rails a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It depends. Like there's now like a community ops job. So, I mean, the community facilitator oftentimes is the one that's also doing ops, like, we need to set up this program or this webinar or this event for the community, and they're doing everything. But if you're talking about just true facilitation, it's welcoming everyone. Like, I believe that everyone new member that comes into a community that they should be welcomed by a member of the team. I think if you see questions that are unanswered, now at the beginning, you're going to need to answer them and then tag in an expert that to help answer the question. But later on, it's just making sure those questions are answered. And if not, tag in someone else. It is reviewing, just kind of like I would call it, because it was a Slack, I work a lot on Slack, roaming the halls of Slack. Like, is there something in here that shouldn't be in here? Most likely, if you've created a good culture that knows what no solicitation, no hate speech, no blah, 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 you will get DM'd right away and from a few people. And then you have to have that kind of tough conversation. And if you've written very good community guidelines, like what you want to see and what you don't want to see both, like what is good behavior and bad behavior. It's like being a mom. It is seriously like being a mom. I've mommed so many members over the days. What good looks like, what good doesn't look like. You can be like, hey, listen, you violated this rule. And then depending on their attitude, it was like either, okay, I understand you're kind of junior. Let's learn from this. This is not what you do. And I would even teach about it. But then if they're like, well, da 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 da, I'm like, well, thank you. We'll be removing your access and have a nice day. Because I don't put up with that. Thank you. Peace out. Yeah, exactly. I'm not dealing with your BS. I don't care. So I think having really clear community guidelines is really important because someday no matter what, everybody tells me, oh, my community is so nice. Our customers are so nice. Our members are so nice. I'm like, oh, you will have to fire somebody one day. Let me guarantee you. And let's have this in writing. It doesn't take long. I have like 85 templates. So just customize one and off you go. And that way we can control the bad actors if we have them.
So I know one of the things that is really popular in a lot of communities and often is a community guideline is this whole like give to get, right? Like you have to give your feedback and knowledge and then for you to receive. How do you create that culture within a community? Because I think sometimes it's great to have it start that way and that be the goal, but it's really hard, I think, sometimes to see fully implemented and see everyone participating, or at least a majority, and by giving their knowledge.
Yeah. You know, you and I have both seen this. One, it's, again, community guidelines. It is what even you're using in your marketing materials. It's like pre-marketing, you know, so by the time this airs, Wednesday Women's membership may be live, but like our ICP is executive women leaders who have an abundance mindset, who believe in bringing other women up along with them and celebrating them along the way. That will be straight front and forward in any marketing materials, and you know, and we're going to reinforce that and also you can reinforce that with rituals. So like, what are the rituals that you have that reinforce that? So for instance, Pavilion has their dinners. They usually talk about, you know, your biggest challenge and people help you. You also have to sell it to them. I remember doing welcome calls, and I still tell people this, is that I've seen hundreds of millions of dollars change hands in business without a pitch. And I'm now living that because I have given. Now, granted, my role allowed me to do that, but I've given to so many people. I help make connections. I help people with job introductions. And now all of my business comes from that community in some sort. And so I'm living what I taught people and promised them that would happen if they followed the rules. So there's a sell job there too. You have to, like, not everybody's built that way, and you have to instill in them, you know, why. If it doesn't come intrinsic, you have to sell them on why it's to their benefit.
Well, and I think one of the things that I see happen is if you start to see in communities, and I've been a part of numerous ones over the years, where there's like a certain group that does a lot of giving, that constantly answers the questions. And there's a lot of people who are, I call them lurkers. They're like, they're everywhere on social media. My husband's a great lurker on social media. He doesn't ever post anything, but he looks at it, right? And he knows what's going on. I think at some point it becomes really hard as the community grows for people to feel the ability to be authentic, to be honest, to share, you know, what's happening in their business, or their personal life, what's going on, results, etc. And so then it starts to move to like the DMs, and it becomes less about a community as a big group and more about like these kind of like personal relationships that you start building with other community members, and the community help you facilitate. So how do you think about, one, you want those personal relationships to happen because they do, like you just said, allow you to grow in your career and help others long term, but also you don't want people ending up in the DMs all the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, true. I will say though, if I look in almost any paid community on Slack and I can see the metrics of like how much happens in public, private, and DMs, it's almost always 70 to 90% in DMs. That's every community I've been. So I don't know that you can change that or fix that. I think part of it is, I mean, I don't know if you were ever a channel leader. It's like having community leaders, people who are there to help, bring in the discussions, also making those people feel special. So that they have, a private channel. Maybe they have a fancy name. Maybe they're, I don't know, whatever you call it. But it's like, give them a name, give them a space, and give them the appreciation, because, a lot of people do that because, it helps them, it helps their social presence, etc. But it does get, wearing. And even if they're not a leader, but they're the ones that are always answering, a simple DM. A simple, like, hey, Stephanie, I've seen you answer like 7 questions this week. They're amazing. Thank you so much for what you're doing for the community. Like a little note like that will make a huge difference, and you'll continue to see that person do it. And even if you start to see someone on the edge of doing that, a little recognition. Again, we're going back to parenting and like psychology, which is honestly why I love community so much, is because it really is. It's a big Rubik's Cube of how do I motivate this group of people to do what I want them to do so that my community can be successful. And so yeah, there's just so many tricks and things to think about on trying to, I don't know, get people to, have the right mindset and be community members to each other and help each other out and be engaged.
Well, one of the things that when I was I guess, channel leader, one of the things that we used to say was, it's like Fight Club. Like no one talks about it. Like when we would have, right? So whatever shared here is private. Whatever we share in a call is private. Like you want that kind of like Fight Club. It happens, but no one talks about it afterwards. And I think that's really helpful to kind of create that type of mindset too. So community building is a super hot topic. I feel like every company is trying to start their own community, whether that's a true community, a customer advisory board, a support group. I mean, you name it, it's all over the place. How do you know it's time to build one? And how do you know it's not time to build one, or it's going to epically fail? Is there anything that you've seen that really helps companies go like, oh, here are kind of like the few things that you should be aware of? If you can't answer these questions or you can't commit to this, it's not time.
Yeah, I would say I spend so much time convincing people out of communities in my calls. One is like, what's the reason why you're doing the community? Are you doing the community for business development, and things like that? And then you don't have an audience. Like you have to have a little bit of an audience already to build a community from scratch. If they don't understand the timelines that I'm telling them, if they can't or won't dedicate a person to it, they shouldn't do it. It takes a lot of cross-functional alignment. So the community that I'm working on right now, which is a B2B SaaS company, it's huge. It's their first community. I had meetings with everyone from, every C-level and VP person, including the CEO. And I will tell you, they were all aligned. They all saw, even though some people wouldn't participate because it's a customer success driven community. So like sales won't participate right now. But once we get going, yes, will there be community qualified leads being passed to them? Yes, that's what we want. Product was really enthused because they want to build the roadmap faster. And I'm like, well, great. This is voice of the customer, like 10.0, just lurk in the community. Even the CEO really was like, he understood, he's that visionary CEO. And that's really kind of what you need, because you need it top down, because besides platform cost, besides my cost, besides someday a FTE, besides whatever else you do, it's 3 years of investment. And so you're not talking about, a tiny bit of money. So you really have to understand all of that to get the most benefit out of that kind of community I'm talking about. So if you come in and I'm like, yeah, no, go hang out in this community. Go hang out where your customers live and do what we talked about earlier, which is the give to get. So that, because if you think about, it's a great example. I remember early on, we voted Graham, forget his last name, from QuotaPath, as the member of the week because he was so giving. We didn't know he was a sponsor. Like, we had no idea that he was the sponsor person in the, compensation channel, that he was the designated person. I don't even know if some of the members knew that. We just knew that he was giving so much. And so, go do that. go be that person. And I know that they built a lot of their business from that kind of mechanism.
I know you mentioned you need to already have a little bit of an audience. Is there a certain amount of an audience that you have to have? Is there like a number that you give it, or is it a number of customers? Like, what does that tend to look like? Because I think that's like a big misconception companies have.
Yeah, you have to have, I mean, just in my opinion, we need to have, we launch in stages. So alpha is like your super users who like, they're the techie ones that want to go break stuff, and then your internal team. Beta is your next 20 to 30 that are like also your fans, but will go in and add conversation and start talking to each other and things like that. I think you have to have about 100, because when you think about general engagement, and we've both seen this, there's that 99 1 rule. So 90% lurk, or like a nicer way to put it in community, because I lurk a lot, but I'm learning, like I'm reading. When I started my job at that community, I didn't know what a CRO was. I didn't know what one did. I didn't know what was important to a chief marketing officer, but you know what I did? I read every channel. I'm like, what? Oh, 17 comments. What are they talking about? Why is this important? So, I mean, learners are important. So that's most of your community. And then 10%, might participate. And then 1% of the ones jumping up and down, waving and welcoming every member when they come in. So I feel like, 100 is it's even low, unless you've got people that are really gung ho and excited. So I'm thinking it's got to be at least 100. If you only have 30 to 50 customers, it's just going to be so hard to like get enough engagement out of there that it doesn't end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy of unengagement, which really isn't. It's just that you don't have the numbers, which turns into unengagement, which turns into like, why am I here?
Well, then I feel like it turns into companies feeling like they need to create opportunities for engagement, which just then turns into like a marketing vehicle for their business, where they just push out like their own content to try and get you to respond. And then I'm like, eventually I just end up getting out of it.
Yeah, there's a community I was in, because I'm like, I wonder how they run this, and then I would get the digest, which I love myself a good digest, but everyone was a person who worked there putting out content or telling about an event or something. There was nothing ever about any conversations. And I'm like, I don't need this general, and it wasn't even valuable marketing content, because I think they save that for like external instead of internal. So yeah, I don't know. You also need, let me go back to one question. You also need content programming. You need, events potentially, but you need content and programming. Like you just can't throw them in there and expect them to do something. So you've got to do these processes to get something in there. I didn't add that earlier, but yeah.
What do you think about content and programming? What have you seen be the most effective in community groups?
Yeah. I think some of that, what did you call it? Fight Club. So, affinity groups within the community that have these unrecorded calls. I think AMAs with the founder. So like when I talk to that visionary founder, I'm like, now, would there be a possibility that I could get you in the community once a month for an AMA? He's like, oh my God, I would love to. I can't wait. And, he's on LinkedIn every day. He believes in the mission of the company. I'm like, awesome. Like an AMA with the founder, whether it's office hours with the success team, maybe it's a product huddle or something that turns into a product group, and you get to be the guru that gets to be in the product group, and all the techies are so excited about that. So yeah, it has to be interactive. It has to be valuable to them, not to you. Which means you have to really listen and talk to your customers or members.
So if let's say I pass kind of your criteria for what I should build a community, what are the biggest stumbling blocks that most companies face when they start that effort?
I think finding the right platform. Because a lot of times what people do first is they go platform, then strategy. And really, strategy needs to come first so you can figure out the platform. So that's where I'm at with my one company right now. I have 3 demos this week, which I need to get it down to 2 that I think would be a good fit for this company. I've never used any of these platforms before. I mean, I have a standard one that I'll use with, GTM revenue leaders. I mean, because, they're already on Slack, and then I just overlay another product on top to give it a hub. But this is all new to me. So it's like, okay, now that I've done customer interviews, I've done internal stakeholder interviews, and we've defined the overarching strategy. Now I can go look at platform. So I think people get stuck on, what platform should I pick? Oh, it's this platform or that platform or whatever, but they're not thinking about their long-term strategy.
Well, I think the other thing I'd add too is I know, as you mentioned, like so many people started in Slack in like 2020 with community groups. And I think if their community has grown, are being very surprised right now by the cost of having thousands of members in a Slack type of environment as well. So I think that's also another thing, is thinking about not just like what's the best platform for the strategy, but as the community grows and engages, and 3-5 years from now, what type of cost model is that going to have, and is that going to be like fit our needs?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because I guess, and some people maybe don't think about that because they're like, well, I don't know if it's going to grow, or I'm going to limit growth. And then they start to see the money come in, and they're like, ooh, forget that idea. We are letting in everybody. Let's go. Take all the money. So, I think it really depends. And yeah, if Slack is listening to this, I mean, I have pulled every string in my book. Because we had some very high level Slack people in our community. So I've talked to them. I have talked to some other friends at Slack, some that run the sales team. And I'm like, will you please just make a community product? And twice they've come to me with a community product that now no longer exists, and it's like, just please. I understand you're going to be like degrading some of your revenue base, but if you make it accessible, the other thousands of communities that are on Slack will make up for that deficit. But, of course, they're a huge company and blah, blah, blah. And they are not listening to me. I have tried. Yeah, if only. They literally don't give an F.
So when you think about the operational perspective, I know you mentioned you have 80 some odd tasks in order to launch a community, but then we have this keeping the community engaged and running operationally. And I know you talked about needing a facilitator. What else operationally needs to happen in order for that to stay engaged long term, for you to help understand if it's working? What do those metrics look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is also kind of, it's not a hot take for anybody in community, but engagement metrics, yes, they're great, but they are kind of vanity metrics, because engagement could mean a lot of different things. And almost every platform measures engagement differently. So on Slack, you can see people who have just logged in and listened, if you're on paid. And you can also see who's commented or emojied. Those are different levels of engagement. Sometimes you can't see that. All you know is if someone commented. You don't know that 80% of your membership is actually logging in and consuming. So anyway, I don't know. I think there's a piece that is a piece, but it's a small piece. Also, I am a fan of surveying. So there is, and I think it was by CMX or David Spinks, who are kind of big name, or David Spinks definitely used to be a big name guru in there. It's called the Community Member Fit Score, which is, I think, based on some type of product, is how disappointed would you be if you could no longer access this community? Not disappointed to I'm crying. And then you can do that for each of your programs. So how disappointed would you be if you could no longer access office hours or X or Y? And so I've been doing that on a 6-month cadence, but I'm moving that with one customer to a 3-month cadence so we can get a better idea of how the different programs that we're launching are moving the needle or not. Of course, with all surveys, challenges on number of respondents and all of that kinds of things. I mean, obviously, if you're on paid, it's member growth, member retention, churn. When you get a little bit more mature, you can do based on referrals. So I know Gong has a lot of data because they've had a customer community forever. Nisha Bakshi is amazing. It serves their long tail customer success. And they have lots of stats about if you're in the community, you are more likely to renew. You're more likely to expand. You're more likely to XYZ. They have tons of data on that. So, eventually you can measure that. Like if you're in the community, then, I've now doubled my purchase or whatever, and referrals. So like how many people are referring you, to others, and does it matter if you're in the community or not? And then of course, one day you'll get these, if it's an open community, it's more of an acquisition type of community. It's community qualified leads. Like how many people end up in the community first before they end up in your sales pipeline? That would be amazing if everybody could measure that. But unfortunately, all these are so hard to measure.
Well, I think that's the hard thing about a lot of stuff that kind of fits in this, brand,
I
which is
was
where
going
I
to say
think
the exact
community,
same thing. It's like brand.
it is, right? Because I think building community is part of building your brand, right? In my opinion.
I
And
agree.
it's hard to measure, but it's also one of the most effective things that you need to be able to do. And it has such a long-term benefit to your business that I think a lot of times we're very short-sighted on, and we want results now and we want metrics now. And I'm not seeing ROI in like 6
No,
months,
no,
right?
no, no.
But isn't
I
that like
told
that?
you. I told you before you signed that contract, you are not going to write anything on a board slide for 18 months. So don't try it.
I feel like there needs to be like a little, thing for people when they build a community that's like, remember, we discussed the following things.
Yes. And that's only if you have a really, your community manager doesn't go off and do their other job, or if you continue to keep on the path to the plan. It's just like everything else. I mean, if sellers don't call people, they're not going to sell, same thing.
Well, and I think it's hard too because we're, especially in like the B2B SaaS world, there's so much of this results now, results now, results now. And it's hard to like separate the things that can't have results now, or the results that they have now they're like baby steps, right? Towards the bigger like ROI driven results that you're going to see in a long-term play. And I think that's oftentimes where community like fails for a lot of businesses is people just aren't patient enough.
Right. Yeah. I definitely saw that. Yeah, 100%. I definitely saw that before the SVB banking thing. It was, again, hot community, all the hot topic. I'm talking to SaaS companies, SaaS, all these people. And then that happened. And then they realized that, ooh, money is drying up. Things are going weird. VCs aren't giving money away like candy. I can't do this. I mean, so almost that's why I'm, eventually I ended up just in mostly in fee-based communities, because the SaaS people couldn't wait that long. So I'm glad to see that it's coming back though. That the call with the visionary founder who got it was just like, there are people out there. Just have to find them.
Yep. We just need more of them, I think. So one of the things that we talked a little bit about before, but a lot of companies or communities start out as free, and then they might end up adding like a paid component to it, or you might need to fund your community through sponsorship. How do you start to figure out what makes the most sense, or how you balance that without it seeming like a constant like sales effort where someone's trying to sell something to you?
Right. I will tell you, I am not a fan of free communities. You should be able to, if you haven't figured out how to deliver $5 a month worth of value, then you probably shouldn't be building a community. Even like I have a customer who I love. We've been working together for over a year and a half now, trying to figure out how to move their free community to a paid community. The free community is so good. And so, we're building chapters around the world and, things like that, and moving buttons around and everything. And we're just going to end up pulling the plug. It's just going to have to be pulled. So like, I think, I've told him, I'm like, if you would just start at $5 a month, and then over time, as you recognize that people are getting value, you went to $10 and then $20. I'm like, you know how many millions of dollars you would have made starting at $5? Because that switch, I'm telling you, I really thought that we could just add enough programming to make the switch, and I was completely wrong. And so I don't know, just don't do free. I mean, if you're going to be like that kind of membership community, I wouldn't ever do free.
Now, would you say, obviously, if it's a company doing it like a customer community, that they're
that's
paying
always
money
free.
for the business, so then
Yeah, yeah,
therefore
yeah.
it's kind of different.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm talking more of like the networking community,
Yeah.
because the company will never probably move to a paid model. But like for a networking community moving to a paid model, then definitely don't start free. I think sponsors can play a very integral part if they are providing knowledge and value. They just have to understand they can't sell into the community. They have to provide the value, and that's where business happens. But it gets to a point where, I mean, I'm seeing this even now, like servicing sponsors is a lot of work. How do you plan your social calendar around your sponsors and then still get put out the content that like you want to put out? It's just, I don't know. That's a very big juggle and trade-off. So I'll just add that to the no free networking communities thing.
Well, and I think sometimes people, when they're like, well, we'll get sponsors to help fund the community, or, even if it's a paid community to add to that, I'm like, that's great. But then now you need to go hire someone to go sell sponsorships and someone, honestly, to help deliver on what you sold in those sponsorships. Because it's not
Dude,
the other
that's
person
me.
that's right.
Both of them are me. This is not fun. Yeah, no,
But
I
it
understand.
shouldn't be, right? It needs to be like a standalone job in a lot of ways because they have very different goals and needs. And you need, I think, like a community manager, eventually as your community grows, like a team of people who are looking out for what's best for community members, which
Yes.
isn't always the same as what's best for like a sponsor. And you kind of need that, like that perspective to be advocated for within the group. So one of the things I think about communities a lot is they need to be reflective of like the broader population that you're targeting. So how do you help ensure like your community is diverse from a variety of different ways and representative of that larger group?
I think that it's just like what we talk about at Wednesday Women is, people talk, oh, I can't find any women, or women don't apply to be on stage as much as men do, or whatever. Well, then guess what? Then you work harder. And that has to be your philosophy from the beginning, and it has to be part of your company values. And that, depending, it just depends on what looking at it from where our lens is in B2B SaaS, you just have to work harder. And you are committed to it. You're committed to the effort. You're committed to the outcome, and you hold yourself and the people in your company accountable for it. So yeah, it's something I'm super proud of with Wednesday Women, is that we've really had a very, dedicated effort to make sure we're highlighting all voices. Of course, they're all amazing. But one of the things that I got the other day in a DM was like, let me tell you how excited I am that when I go and look at Wednesday Women, I see myself. I don't often see that. And that was like one of the, like, I'll get teary-eyed about that. That's like one of my proudest moments, is that. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. You just have to you have to do the work.
Well, and I think I try and tell people it's important for people to feel seen, like you just said, but then
Yes.
also like it's every day, because I think sometimes companies make a really good effort at trying to create diversity and making sure it's representative when they launch or like initially, but they don't realize like you have to keep doing it on a regular basis, and you have to make sure not only is the group diverse, but also that those people feel it's a safe space to speak up and the conversations are diverse as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and that they feel, appreciated and part of the group. And yeah, there's so much to that is, I think that's a whole nother podcast.
Great. You've mentioned Wednesday Women a couple times now, and
Sorry.
that has grown. No, I love it, because I want to ask you my next question, which is that has grown pretty rapidly on LinkedIn. How did that all come together and happen?
Yeah, actually, it was a post that I made about, I don't know, I need to figure out, I'm going to say 2.5 years ago, because I've known now Melissa for almost 2 years. So it must have been 2.5 years ago. just saying, who are the women CEOs I should follow? Because there are not in my feed, and my feed is desolate of women CEOs. You are in the same kind of ecosystem as me, and the women I see keynoting, which I still see keynoting, Alina from Chili Piper and Arena from Hootsuite. There's got to be more than 2 people that can keynote at big conferences. And so I'm like, who are these people? And that post just kind of blew up. Lots of people chimed in, Sarah Blakely, she didn't chime in, but like people were tagging those kinds of CEOs too. And so I decided to have a Fiverr guy come in, and I still use the same Fiverr guy. I love my Fiverr guy. And take that information and write their names down, their titles, their companies, their LinkedIn profile. And okay, great. And then I'd see another post. It's like when you see a white car, you see a whole bunch of white cars. So I saw another post, and I sent the Fiverr guy after it, another post, Fiverr guy after it. And then I just started dropping the very fancy Google sheet into people's feeds when they asked the same question. I'm like, oh, here you go. Here's 100, here's 50 or whatever. And I just went about doing that. And then one day I ended up in Melissa Moody's feed, who's my co-founder. And she's like, what are you going to do with this Google sheet? And I'm like, I don't know. I was just making a Google sheet. I don't know. It's educational or something, or it makes me feel good or whatever. She's like, well, what if we did one thing? And, if you go to our page, you'll see a lot of talk about a ripple. It's like, what if we just highlighted one woman every week? Like, we both had other full-time jobs. So it's like, she'd make the carousel because she's the crafty creative CMO, and I would try to post on LinkedIn on Wednesdays because we said, why not? We're going to name it Wednesday Women. She came up with that. She was on a mid-journey kick. And so we made our first couple posts, and somehow we convinced, it must have been mostly our friends, that, being featured on a LinkedIn page with no followers would get them more exposure. So anyway, it just kind of organically grew because, a lot of people, they really like seeing these women and the women behind the title. So not just I'm, like you, CEO of XYZ. Well, who is CEO of XYZ? What do they believe in? What do they talk about? Why do they talk about it? What's their TED Talk? And what's their fun fact? Like, what makes them a person? And, we're not a community, even though that's what we always say is like, we actually have a talk, Melissa and I, called Building Community Without Building a Community, that we've given a couple of times. And I think people resonated with that. Like women executives have too much to do than to go into a community for 15 minutes, 3 times a week to try to get value. And so I think people just really like that. And then all of a sudden, like people started sharing, and their companies shared, and everybody shared. And then, of course, that helped us get, a different level of people. And we've also diversified well beyond, even though our network started off with B2B SaaS. I've featured the VP of Mission Control at the FAA, or like people that are just like way outside of our, women in privacy. So people way outside of our normal thing. But plus, this is GTM Confessions. We will run out of women in SaaS to feature at some point.
Hopefully that problem will eventually no longer be a problem, but right now it will.
Definitely.
Very much so.
So that's how we started. It was literally just me in a Google sheet, and then meeting Melissa, and she's an executor like I am, me, I'm no BS. It's like, if we're going to talk, let's get down to business. And that's how we started. We weren't even a company when we first started. We were just posting on LinkedIn, and then somebody started being interested in being a sponsor. I'm like, well, they're not going to write a check to myself. So we became an LLC. And then, last year was just an amazing year, brought on some great sponsors, grew our following organically to 10,000. We have these raving fans that write in every day. How do I become a member of Wednesday Women? 3 people have volunteered to be the chapter head of Wednesday Women. I'm like, we don't have chapters. The first one asked even before we'd written a newsletter. I'm like, I don't even have a newsletter. So, but we are building a membership this year, which is going to be different than a community, so that we can deliver to people instead of having them come to us, and very much along the lines of that growth mindset and the way I've seen these women unlock doors for each other, even through this in very informal setting, has been really amazing. And so, like, let's add a little tech to make that happen, and really like juice up what Melissa and I have kind of been doing by hand, and, make it a thing, make it a real business. That's our goal this year.
I love that. So last question then, that I ask everyone, which is thinking about go-to-market. So marketing, sales, customer success, product. What is your biggest go-to-market confession?
Ooh, a confession or a rant?
Either one. I love both.
Okay. My biggest go-to-market rant. Well, there's two things. Confession is, I'm not an expert in that at all. We luckily have brought on a board of advisors from all the different segments of the go-to-market who are like super accomplished. And one of them is like all over me about getting my P&L done right. So one is I definitely am not an expert in that at all. My biggest rant on all things go-to-market and building companies and scaling is like, the question of when you're especially early and you're iterating fastest, is that scalable? No, it's not. And it's not meant to be. And it never will be. Like sending that DM to the member who's doing, really amazing things, it's never going to be scalable. But it's going to make a difference. And that's okay. And honestly, we're still little. We don't need to worry about scalability right now. We can fix it later because right now, creating the love of the customer for us, and that's where like Melissa and I are at too, like what we're doing isn't scalable, making personal introductions, all of this kind of stuff, but that's okay. That's why people love the brand. And so, yeah, I hate when people say that. It's an excuse. It's just lazy. Is that scalable? No, it's not. Not going to be, not meant to be. And it's about, especially if it's about your customer, that really gets me like, no, we're not going to have a chat bot reach out to our members and tell them, thank you for being a member. Not happening.
You've been listening to GTM Confessions. If you love what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And don't forget to tell a friend.